and welcome to Joy in Our Town, TBN, St. Joseph, Kansas City. I am your host, Lindsay Hardiman, and today's hot topic is dealing with one we will always deal with, the weather. And being a part of the Heartland, you know we experience all four seasons, summer, fall, winter, and spring. So join with us today is Andy Bailey, who is going to speak with us about some general weather safety. Andy Bailey, welcome.
Thanks a lot, Lindsay. I appreciate it.
We're glad you could join us.
Yeah, thanks.
So let's open up by telling our viewers briefly about what you do at the National Weather Service in Kansas City.
Okay, at our office in the National Weather Service, we do all of the forecasts and warnings for 44 counties in far eastern Kansas, and then from west central through northwest and north central Missouri. Essentially north of I-70 and most of that part of Missouri, and then the far eastern part of Kansas. So pretty busy job. A lot of
right.
fun. Yeah.
All right, so you just said warning. Can you tell us what is the difference between a watch and a warning?
Sure, yeah, that's a really important thing to know. When we issue a watch, whether it's a winter storm watch or say a severe thunderstorm or tornado watch, what we're really telling people is that's the time to prepare. Mm-hmm. Okay, we're not saying you need to take action immediately. Just prepare, pay closer attention to the weather. In the spring and summer months when it's a severe or tornado watch, that just means really, plan accordingly. Mm-hmm. Maybe you've got outdoor plans later in the day. Maybe consider postponing those.
Okay.
Until the weather rolls through.
Get ready for what's coming.
Exactly right.
Okay.
Yeah. And a warning, though, that's when it's time to take action. So with a severe thunderstorm warning or a tornado warning, that's when you really need to do your sheltering plans and take the proper precautions. And then obviously in a winter situation, that would mean maybe reevaluate your travel plans. Are you going to be able to go to work? You're probably going to have to line up some alternative either transportation methods or alternative plans depending on how severe the weather is.
All right, so how can we receive this type of information for the warning or the watch?
It's really interesting. The ways to receive watches and warnings has just literally exploded over the last 5 or 10 years. There's so many different ways. It used to be all you could get the watches and warnings on were TV weather.
Right.
And now, everybody has a cell phone in their pocket.
Exactly.
And there are so many apps now to get watches and warnings. That's a great way. There's a system that was produced by the FCC and the cell phone industry called wireless emergency alerts. And certain types of really high impact warnings will automatically show up on cell phones now.
I had that happen a few days ago.
I bet you did. The things that will go off around here are either amber alerts, which is not weather related, but we'll also have flash flood warnings and tornado warnings. And those are a really great thing because you don't have to sign up for it. When you get a cell phone, it's just automatically turned on. And the way it works is really good because if there is a cell phone tower inside a warning that's in range of your cell phone, it will send the warning information to your phone automatically.
Wow.
So you don't have to program in where you're at or anything like that.
Just having a phone.
Yeah, it's really helpful. Sure. Yeah. So those are really probably the biggest ways to get it. But at our office, we also have a Facebook page, a Twitter feed. Both of those our meteorologists do an outstanding job of sending out all sorts of weather information, really to help people make better decisions based on the weather. So if they're on Facebook or on Twitter, I'd encourage them to search for the National Weather Service Kansas City and give us a like or a follow because there's a ton of good information on there.
Okay, so we know how to get the information, but how quickly do you all work to get this information out?
Certain things like winter storms, it's a lot slower evolving.
Right.
We may deliberate for several hours over the forecast, just making sure everything's right or snowfall totals are accurate. But if it's a tornado event, we're talking we need to make split-second decisions based on the radar data or maybe a spotter report, and sometimes they'll have maybe 20, 30 seconds to get the warning out. So that kind of situation is a lot more like an emergency room kind of thing like you may see on TV where people are working very frantically to kind of deal with the weather. It's very organized, but it's certainly very busy.
Okay, so just like you said, for watching one of the winter weather storms, you have to take your time to process it to make sure you're getting the right information out. So how do you all gather and collect this information? How does that work?
Oh, boy, we have a lot of networks. We'll start with, we have automated observing stations at some of the larger airports. At both the international airport in Kansas City and the downtown airport, there's an automated station that just automatically records temperature, wind speed, sky cover, that sort of thing, and sends that to us. During inclement or severe weather, we have storm spotters that will report in whether it's snowfall reports in the wintertime or hail size, wind damage, maybe their trees were damaged, or even some of the more highly trained storm spotters will go out and actually spot tornadoes for us and relay that into us. That kind of information is really critical because things like the radar doesn't necessarily show us everything we need to see. We need those human eyes on the storms to relay that report into us.
All right. Okay, so you said severe weather several times. So how do you define severe weather? What is severe weather?
People might find this a little strange, but when it comes to severe thunderstorms, we define a severe thunderstorm as a storm having 58-mile-an-hour straight line winds or greater, or 1-inch diameter hail. And the reason we have that kind of strange 58-mile-an-hour threshold is because the aviation industry has told us that 50 knots is important to their operation, and that turns out to be 58 miles an hour. And then also we consider tornadoes and flash flooding as severe weather as well.
All right, so what is the #1 severe weather threat in our area?
Believe it or not, it's heat. Heat kills more people in this region every year than all other weather events combined.
Wow.
Followed closely by flash flooding. Flash flooding is the second leading cause of death, and tornadoes are a distant third. In fact, I'd probably put winter weather ahead of tornadoes.
Wow.
Which is, I guess, a good thing.
Yeah,
around
it
here.
definitely
yeah.
is.
But yeah, a lot of people don't realize that extreme heat in the summertime really has an impact on the elderly, people with certain health conditions. The heat can complicate things and oftentimes lead to fatalities.
And how can we protect ourselves? I mean, of course, it's kind of inevitable when you have to go outside to be in the heat, but is there any way we can prepare?
Certainly, yeah. Let's start with the people who are most vulnerable.
Okay.
We'll say the elderly. Oftentimes, the elderly are on certain medications that can affect their body's ability to regulate the heat. And what we recommend when we're in the middle of one of those heat waves, check on your elderly neighbors and relatives. Just make sure they're doing okay. Oftentimes, some of them are afraid of having too high of an electric bill, so they'll turn their air conditioning to a warmer setting, and they may not realize, or sometimes there may be a little bit of senility or something like that, and they may not realize their air conditioning is not working.
Right.
And without somebody checking on them, they can succumb to the elements indoors.
Oh, wow.
For those maybe who aren't at such a higher risk, but still maybe work outside, or even if they exercise outside, you need to plan your activities accordingly.
Yeah.
Try to get anything outdoors done as early in the day as possible, and then try to stay out of the heat, in the heat of the day, during the afternoon hours. Sometimes that's not possible for folks who have to work outside, whether they're in construction or maybe working on a highway. You just really have to make sure you take frequent breaks, stay hydrated, avoid caffeinated beverages, certainly avoid any alcoholic beverages, and just stick with water. Sports drinks can be helpful as well, but the frequent breaks in water are really, really important.
Okay. All right, so let's stop and put some information on the screen for our viewers at home. If you would like to get more information about the National Weather Service in Kansas City, you can contact them at 816-540-6021 or visit the website located on your screen at weather.gov/KC. All right, so we know that the #1 threat is heat followed by flooding. So can you tell us a bit about that?
Sure. With the flooding, what's interesting is we tend to get our biggest flood days on days that originally looked like they were going to be a big severe thunderstorm or tornado day. Oftentimes those storms form off to the west over Kansas and maybe do produce some severe weather and some tornadoes. By the time they reach the Kansas City area, western Missouri, oftentimes those storms have congealed into one large complex that really turn out to be less of a severe weather threat and more of a heavy rain threat. And certainly in a metro area like Kansas City, a lot of what used to be trees and grass and that sort of thing has been turned into buildings and pavement and parking lots. And certainly, all that cement and asphalt does not absorb water. When you get excessive rainfall, it all runs off into the low-lying areas, and that's really what produces the flooding. But it is kind of a challenging thing to forecast, since oftentimes it does start out originally looking at like a different threat, but then things evolve and change, and by the time the storms actually reach us, the threats change usually to a flash flood scenario.
Exactly why you have all eyes just trying to watch it and keep up.
That's exactly right, yeah.
All right, so we know that we have heat and then the flooding, but does each season cause for a different type of threat or anything like that?
Sure. We've talked a lot about the heat and thunderstorms, and that's primarily probably a mid to late spring through maybe August or September type of event. But when we get into the wintertime, the threats obviously completely change. And for us, we deal with snowstorms, and their impacts are kind of fleeting, where we'll get maybe 6 to 12 inches of snow from a big storm, and then we can plow the roads and everybody goes about their business. The real threat that we haven't seen for several years here in Kansas City, and I hope I'm not jinxing this, but it's the ice storms, when you get a half inch or an inch of ice that accumulates on power lines and knocks down power poles. It's not unusual in this part of the country to get big ice storms that knock out power for 1 to 2 weeks at a time. And that's such so much larger of an impact for our region than a snowstorm, which, it snows one day, we plow the streets, and while that's inconvenience, we can usually get about our daily activities pretty quickly after that. Ice storm is a completely different animal, and that's something we haven't had to deal with for around 12 to 15 years in Kansas City.
Yeah, I remember that ice storm we had.
Yeah, they're really a problem.
Okay, so let's switch topics a little bit from, we talked about the severe weather threats in our area for each season, but can you tell me what the greenhouse effect is? And
Sure.
how does that affect us in the Kansas City area?
Sure. The greenhouse effect, people throw that terminology around quite a bit, but the greenhouse effect is essentially what makes the Earth a livable planet. It's the things like water vapor and carbon dioxide in the atmosphere that kind of help insulate the Earth and hold the heat in at night. Because during the day, we're receiving more energy from the sun than is escaping out into space. And so we warm up during the day. But at night, when it's dark and we're not receiving any incoming solar energy, it's the clouds, the water vapor in the atmosphere, and the carbon dioxide that actually hold that heat into the Earth so we don't get just unlivably cold at night. So the greenhouse effect is actually very beneficial to us.
And is that linked to global warming in any type of way?
Well, when we're talking about global warming is really an increase in those greenhouse gases, chiefly among them carbon dioxide and methane. Those two things, as the increase in concentrations in the atmosphere, tend on a global scale to increase atmospheric temperatures. Now, the temperature increases we're talking about from global warming aren't all that dramatic. We're talking about around 2 degrees centigrade or 3 or 4 degrees Fahrenheit over maybe 50 years. And people might think, that's not such a big deal. But the problem is it's for the climate, it's a rapid change. Things like trees and other things certainly can't migrate and can't adapt. It actually does things like changes the salinity or the pH of the ocean water, which then can harm certain types of fish and sea life, and it can also cause really devastating storms in some areas and drought in others because the whole global pattern is altered.
All right, and are we kind of experiencing any of those effects right now, would you say?
Scientists think, I'm not a climate expert, but climate scientists have told us that we do start to see some of these things starting to show up in the amount and types of hurricanes we see. We used to see some locations receive a 100-year flood. That meant, on average, you could expect to see those maybe once out of every 100 years. We're starting to see the 100-level floods with increasing regularity. There are some signs that, we're starting to see a little more extreme weather. And while we can't tie any individual storm system to global warming, when we look at the trends over a couple of decades and we start to see the increase, you can start to draw some conclusions that that's probably a contributing factor to that.
All right. Well, Andy Bailey, thanks for joining us.
It's my pleasure.
And viewers, we're going to put some information on the screen. If you would like to contact the National Weather Service in Kansas City, you can give them a call at 816-540-6021, or again, visit the website on the screen at weather.gov/KC. And again, viewers, thank you for tuning in to Joy in Our Town, TBN St. Joseph, Kansas City. I am your host, Lindsay Hardiman, and have a wonderful week.
So who's going to do what?
I'll pack the dead batteries.
Great.
I'll only put what I don't need into a duffel bag.
Perfect. That's totally unhelpful.
No problem.
Meanwhile, I will try to comfort everyone by speaking in a calm voice. And who is going to handle supplies?
I can forget to do a list for us.
Thanks, pal.
We couldn't be any less prepared. I'm proud of you guys.
Talk to your kids about who to call, where to meet, what to pack. Visit ready.gov/kids for tips and information.
It seems every time we turn on the news or listen to the radio, someone else has gone off the deep end. Today, we're going to talk about how to be emotionally well. I'm Kimberly Warren, and our special guest is Kristina Hannon from the Family Guidance Center. Hang on to your seat. You're in for a treat. You are watching Joy in Our Town. Kristina Hannon, welcome to the show.
Good to see you.
You're no novice here, and you're no novice with the mentally ill in our community. How long have you been at Family Guidance now?
I've worked at Family Guidance Center for 12 years.
Wow, and now, for the last few years, you've been the vice president?
Yes, I have oversight for all of our behavioral health services.
Wonderful. Now, I am I guess I am amazed, but I'm not because, of the profession that I'm in. But every time you turn on the news, just yesterday, there was another shooting at a community college, in the theaters, in places of worship, in schools, the mall, restaurants. Is any place safe?
Yes, yeah. One of the issues is because we do live in a 24/7, 365 news cycle, and we have so many news stations which have a lot of airtime to fill, and stories about successful mental health treatment that get people into services and help people get well and recover for a long period of time don't draw any immediate attention. And what is a lot easier to get a media story onto a news program is a story about a catastrophe, because people are going to tune into that. And it's also easy as humans, whenever something like that horrible happens, a tragedy happens, we always try to find a way to rationalize it, because we tend to be pretty rational as beings. And so we want to find a way to rationalize it. And a lot of times we jump straight to, they must be mentally ill, they must be crazy.
Right.
And looking at that, that's not necessarily the case. One of the biggest issues in terms of the shootings and the gun violence that we're seeing now is that there were warning signs for people to get into treatment, but they didn't. And there are a number of factors which prohibit people from getting into a successful treatment.
Do you believe that there is a breaking point for every person, and there's a fine line between sanity and insanity sometimes?
Yes, everybody has a breaking point. We all have I always tell families that we are all one catastrophic incident away from a diagnosis of a post-traumatic stress disorder or an acute stress disorder or some other stress-related condition. So we all have a point in our lives where things become so overwhelming that we really can't handle them and manage our life anymore.
So the mother in Newport, who was also a teacher, there were some warning signs there. When do you take a person seriously, and when you say, they're not going to do anything? Because people say all the time, I just want to blow up this place, or I'm going to kill myself, or, oh, I hate this life. So when do you call 911 or call for backup? And when do you say, they're just blowing off steam?
All threats should always be taken seriously. Anytime anyone is stressed enough to the point where they would say the words, I'm just going to kill myself, that means that at some level they've had that thought, or at some level they've had a thought that they want whatever they're stating they're going to blow up not to be there anymore. So we really advise people take all threats seriously. Where you start to look at when you get into treatment, you don't want to wait until somebody is in such an acute state of crisis, because at that point it's going to take longer to be more effective. So what you want to look at is whenever you start to notice behavioral changes in your child or adolescent, if you have a kiddo in your family and all of it, they were an AB student and their grades start to stop, they had a group of friends, all of a sudden they don't want to participate in them, their hygiene habits have changed, the amount that they're speaking or the tone that they're using has changed, the way that they're dressing has changed, all of those things could be warning signs. So, and it's very similar in adults too, issues of hygiene, ability to attend work and school, ability to participate in normative activities, ability to sleep and eat for across the lifespan. If you're noticing sleep disturbance, eating disturbance, those can be very early warning signs that there may be that stress may be becoming a problem for you.
What is the ultimate goal at Family Guidance Center? Because it just seems like in this crazy world we live in that it's difficult to find one person that doesn't have anxiety or stress at some time during the week.
And most people in their daily life will have some level of anxiety or stress. Where it really starts to become
just driving to work.
Exactly, right. When you start to have a diagnosable mental illness is when that anxiety or stress interferes with your ability to work, to participate in your life in a meaningful way, or interferes in your ability to maintain daily functions that we all do, eat, sleep, go to work, school, play. And so that's when it really becomes a problem. And what you look at in terms of coping with that are what we call factors of resiliency. People who are able to manage the daily stress and anxieties and depression that they go through are people who have a solid support network. They may have a faith community that they feel connected to. They may have a solid group of friends they feel connected to. They have outlets and ways to kind of express those things so that they don't feel like it's just one more thing bottled on top of one more thing.
When you're trying to prevent a catastrophe or a meltdown, how do you fine-tune that or pin that down? Whose problem is it? Because, you know, as a member of the clergy, I hear a lot of people saying, it's my husband's fault. It's the neighbor's fault, throwing the trash across. It's the boss's fault. He keeps disrespecting me. And so when do you know that it's extraneous variables and maybe you need to change jobs, change families or you know, neighborhoods, or it's something within how you're perceiving that situation?
That's when it's really a good time to talk to an objective third party and find somebody who doesn't have a vested interest in maintaining your position. So if you're, for example, your stress is work and you think it's really all your boss and your employer and they have unreasonable expectations, the best person to talk to about that would probably not be your spouse or best friend, because they really have an interest in supporting you in that and saying
They're
you're
loyal.
right. Yeah, to be loyal to you as a person, which is a very good thing, but you need to find somebody outside of that close group that you have and say to yourself, is this really what's going on in my life and in my situation?
So another coworker too, or someone else in the same situation may not be objective.
Correct.
Okay, so let's talk about prevention again. Yeah. Are the warning signs different from children or teenagers than there are for adults?
There are some that are different, especially with young kids. Certain symptoms like depression, anxiety, and stress in children can manifest as physical health symptoms because they may not have the vocabulary to say, I'm stressed, I'm anxious, I'm depressed, and they don't know what those words mean. They may say, my tummy hurts, or I can't talk to people, or they may become excessively shy, or they could, when it gets very severe, they can actually vomit from the stress and anxiety that they feel. And for adults, they can also, especially older adults, people who are over 65 and to 80, somewhere in there, they primarily will begin to see mental health symptoms manifest as physical health symptoms as well. But for the rest of the population, we're able to say the things to people that, I have stress, I have anxiety, I feel nervous, I feel uncomfortable, I'm hearing voices, we have people notice those things about us.
Can you prevent catastrophes, meltdown, acting out in inappropriate ways? Some people feel like it's beyond their control. The voices are telling me this, or this is my only option. What are some of your preventative strategies?
As a society, we really have a responsibility to prevent those, and that's everyone's responsibility. And when you start to look at ways to prevent things like what have been happening with school shootings, there are two big barriers. One big barrier is access to good mental health care and the stigma in getting mental health care. And so you have to identify each service system and identify ways to improve access or getting in to see somebody. The other real big issue is that we have a mental health system throughout our nation and in our state and every state across the nation that we don't have an ability to compel people to get treatment. People have to be in such an acute state of crisis and ready for a catastrophe before we can force people into mental health and substance abuse treatment.
So they have to make a statement or have harmed someone else or themselves.
Yes,
Is
that's correct.
Okay.
Before we can force people to get treatment. And again, when you let people get that sick, it's just like a physical health condition. If you have diabetes and you wait until you're in a diabetic coma until you seek treatment, or somebody forces you at that point to go in an ambulance,
it's out of control?
It is. It's out of control, and it's going to take you longer to recover.
Wow. If you're just now tuning in, we're talking about stress, anxiety, and how to prevent, and eventually we're going to talk about more intervention strategies. Our special guest is Kristina Hannon with Family Guidance Center. If you would like to contact them, we have the information on the screen. They are located on 22nd Street, 724 North 22nd Street here in St. Joseph. They also have a site downtown. They also have a site in other areas close by. For the crises number, we must put that on the screen for you. If you would like to intervene for yourself or for a friend or loved one that you think need the help, the number is 888-279-8188. That's 888-279-8188. That is a 24-hour crises line. Let's talk more about intervention, because in the last year, Family Guidance has developed some type of integrated home care.
Yes.
So tell us about that.
Under the Affordable Care Act, there is a concept called a healthcare home, and it's kind of a misnomer. We always have to explain it's not an actual home. It's not a place that you go. But what a healthcare home is under the Affordable Care Act is a place that you go to get your medical treatment throughout your lifespan. Okay. And it involves a heavy component of care management, care coordination, and really focusing on helping you get the best possible quality health care under underneath that quality of healthcare, we really focus on integrating all areas of healthcare, because one of the biggest problems with our healthcare system has been that you would have a primary care provider, but then you would see a range of specialists, and those people may or may not have the ability or availability to talk to each other. And so when you have a nurse acting as your care manager, it is that person's responsibility to ensure that your care is coordinated and all of your providers are talking, so that you get the best possible quality of care, and so that everyone knows what's going on with each one of your medical systems.
So you call it a health care home team. Do they come to your home,
They
sit
do.
down in your living room and
Yes.
see your environment?
Yes. Yeah, we have nurse care managers who they're community based, and they go to all of our consumer homes in the 9-county service area. So they're very mobile. They will come out to your home, review medications with you. They'll go to doctor's visits with you. They will make phone calls to doctor's offices on your behalf if you would like.
Do you think it's a little bit easier to go to a person's home? You get a better insight instead of
Yes.
being in a clinical setting?
Yeah, and people are more natural in their home environments. Our office environment, while it's a fairly new building, we've only been there 4 years, and it's well decorated and maintained, it's not home. And so when you go into somebody's home, they're more relaxed, they're more comfortable, they're more apt to talk to you. You can also gather a lot of information about their home. It's easy for us to tell if we go into somebody's home and they have a sink full of dishes. We ask, do you have running water? Or we go in and it's colder than what it should be, or they have space heaters hooked up. We talk about, do you need assistance with getting your gas reconnected? Or we can just say, if we're going over diet and nutrition, we just say, do you mind if we go to your refrigerator and see what you have that you could prepare this recipe tonight? And so it's easy for us to see that way if that person is in a food scarce household.
Kristina, wow, we need to have you back for another show. In closing, for those that are watching today, trying to encourage their friends and loved ones to access the mental health care system, what have been the most effective ways to encourage them to see a counselor or to let a home care representative come by?
The most effective way is to offer your support and to say, I will go with you, I will be there with you.
Wonderful.
And to get that person to feel really comfortable, to avoid using words like crazy or saying you don't really feel that way, that's not really happening to you.
Okay.
Really validate the person who you're wanting to go get mental health treatment and be there with them. Take that extra step and say, I will take a day off work, I will take 2 hours off work, I will go with you and I will be with you through that process, and then help support them in that.
That is wonderful. Please come back
Yes,
again.
I sure will. Thank
In
you so much,
closing,
Kim.
let's put the information on the screen for the crises hotline. It is 888-279-8188. It's 24 hours. If you know someone is suicidal, depressed, or just need more tips and strategies to manage life's anxieties and strategies and anxieties, please have them call the Family Guidance Center. Kristina Hannon and her team of trained counselors are there to assist you. Again, they're located at 724 North 22nd. They also have a site downtown. They have a site in
Cameron and Maryville.
Cameron and Maryville. So please give them a call. The crises hotline is 888-279-8188. And there's also information for the 364-1501 for appointments. Again, thank you for being here. And we want to thank you for watching Joy in Our Town, TBN, Channel 16. I'm Kimberly Warren. Have a wonderful week.
This program has been sponsored by the Trinity Broadcasting Network and made possible by your telethon dollars. Your continual support can keep Joy in Our Town brought to your home every day. So write Joy in Our Town, P.O. Box A, Santa Ana, California, 92711.